Hey, how you doing? This is Bryan. I'm going over a computer build. I bought all the parts offline, did my research, and now the parts are here. So we're going to go ahead and start this thing. Here we have the power button, the reset switch, an LED turn-off switch for a package I did not get. It's the microphone jack and the headphone jack, and USB 2.0 and two USB 3.0 jacks. And on the top, you have what's called a dust screen. That gets cleaned once in a while, so periodically you're going to want to wipe that down. Take it off, clean it off with a damp cloth, and then let it dry, and then put it back on. It's magnetized, as you see with this magnetic strip all the way around it. And you just place it back on, and it just sits there magnetized loosely, so don't worry if you don't get it on right. You can move it. Next is the glass case. That's the made of real tempered glass, and it has protective film on it, which you take off when you're installing. Let's rest it out of the way, and we'll continue with the build. So on the bottom is another little filter. This one is not magnetized. It's kind of held in there just by a little pressure. You can pull that out and clean off like the top one. Then you place it back. It has little grooves. Get it in the grooves and then flip it in there. It's very pliable, so that it's easy to kind of just push it into place. And that's for your, it's a power supply intake. Oh, I'm sorry, it's the output. This is the back case. It's the back cover. Comes right off. You just need to take out two screws to get that out. Inside of every case you get, this one's an Antec case, which I recommend highly. They're a very good company for cases and power supplies. Always comes with this little kit that has the screws in it. A little piece of information there, a little paper that you get just describing the warranty and everything for the case. Here out of the case, we got the three, they call those covers for your PCI slots in the back. So that's where they would go. Sometimes you need to put in something, so you remove what's there, and it's usually held in by a little bit of pressure. You could pop those out and put in whatever you need. In the back here, we have a space for the an SSD drive if you need it. Okay, it looks like here we have the wiring for the case, and that comes inside the case already wired. So we undo it, and we get rid of these little tie wraps because they have metal in them. We want to remove them entirely and throw them away. And we'll use felt strips in there to hold the wires down properly later. So we just kind of undo it, check out the wires we have, and make sure they're straight and unbroken. This one looks like it's for the fan, so you got to plug that into power when we put in the power supply. There's the fan, and it will turn that on and keep it cool. This is the USB 3 connector for the front panel that I showed you before. Then we got the audio cable. It has the one punch out there that you won't be able to put it into another slot on the motherboard. Okay, and this one looks like USB regular 2.0 from the front panel, that one that we had. And then we got our leads that go into the motherboard to turn it on and show us the LED lights. Here's our power supply. We have the main power connector for the motherboard. It has a piece that you can remove if the motherboard does not require it. So you can remove that piece if you need to. This one goes to the CPU. This connector is for your SATA power, SATA power. It goes into hard drives and the DVD drive if you have one. This one's an older style power adapter for a hard drive, an older hard drive, or the DVD or CD-ROM player. And there's the fan and the power supply itself. That's the big fan that faces down where that filter was. So it's going to point down against that area, blowing outward. And that's where it's going to go. So you put the fan down so that it filters out of that little area on the bottom. And you make sure your wires are out of the way when you're doing it. You just kind of push them out of the way so that everything's still, it's going to hang there for a bit. But that's fine as long as the end product looks nice. And we just line it up with the holes inside the back of the case. Most power supplies are just like this, and you won't have any trouble. The 4 screws always line up. If they don't, you got to recheck the power supply. But usually it's orientated so that when you line up these holes, they're in there right. Use the coarse thread that came with the case, the N-Tech case, and 4 of them. You just screw them in. You can use a regular screwdriver. I just use this power tool. It's a variable drill, so I can go slowly with it or faster. This is our motherboard. I just chose this one. It had a good rating and for gaming, and so I chose this particular motherboard. These are the holes where we're going to put the screws to put it down onto our Antec case. This is the back panel. This area here, we need a back plate, so we're going to have to put that on. But we're showing you the cables for your SATA drives, if you have any. This is the cable. These are the cables you would use, and these are SATA connectors that you would connect those cables to. One of them is an angled connector. Now, that depends on how you're going to put it in. You see, one of them's flat and the other one's angled. This is just your preference. Both sides will fit just the same into one of these sockets that is on your motherboard. And it's really just used for wire management, so whichever one fits is the one you use there. Now this is a Wi-Fi device, and it works in most homes for business and stuff, but for gaming you're not going to want to use Wi-Fi. So I just kind of keep this wrapped in its package, and I do not use that. I'm not going to use the wireless. That's the back plate I'm talking about that goes right here, but we don't put it on the motherboard. We're going to be putting that back plate on the case itself first. This is very important. Right here, that's where the cutout is. It's a universal cutout, so it'll fit in there nice. It has a little beveled edge. Well, you got to remember it's sharp too. But it has an edge in there, and it has a little bump in it. Now the bump is where you want to fit it in there. You see how it kind of wiggles into place? You got to get it close. And then what you're going to do on the edges here, you're going to make sure these edges are popped in properly. There's a little gap over here. And you're going to make sure that when you're done pushing that plate in, that there's no gap. That's the hard part, because you do have to snap this whole thing in place. It kind of snaps in there. So it's difficult to put in. See how I'm using both sides? I'm in there in the case with my one hand. The other hand's outside, making sure there's enough pressure, and I'm feeling around. Just be careful, the edges are sharp. And once you snap it fully into place, it should be even all around. You'll see a little flexing, and that's okay. Now, this is the screw package for the M.2 drive. Then we have inside the case where we're putting these are our mounting points for the motherboard, which I showed you earlier. There we go. Another one there. Now, there's an empty one here. We need to get, there's an empty one there. We're going to use the top and the bottom because the middle one we don't need. See, we don't need the middle one. Now all in there is our unit that we're gonna face against the faceplate we put in earlier. And these little things are grounds for the unit. It's okay if they get a touch, as long as that one's the hard one. Right there, that one will get into the connector if you do it wrong. So I usually give it a little flex upward, just so it's out of the way. Here's our two units. There's a third one, but we're only going to use two. Their bottom and the top. And screw it in. And then you got to tighten it in there well. So I just use a little bit, and I just kind of slowly tighten it till it goes in. Now it's flush, and it should be level with the others that are in the case already. Yep, don't tighten them too much. You'll strip them, and that'll be a problem. You angle the motherboard in like this so that it goes underneath this section here so that you don't get it into the connector. The others just kind of push in, and when you push it in right, you'll see that it seals against that unit, and everything will look nice. Once you get it in there, we didn't need that one, and that's fine. You got to line up the screw holes and make sure you fit in the right screws. Just make sure you get the right screw for the standoff, they call them, that goes into the case to hold the motherboard in place, and that's the standoff. This is memory, and that is our Core i7 processor, and regular fan for the processor. That's our M.2 drive, 1 terabyte. That's where the processor goes. It's got a little cover you have to remove, and there's 4 holes for the fan itself. This is where the M.2 drive goes out, and that's where we're going to be putting that screw I showed you earlier in the little package. It's a very small screw, so don't lose it. I have extras if you do. There it is. It's our M.2 drive, 1 terabyte. It's a very fast hard drive. Slide it in. And then you use the smaller screwdriver to screw it in. Make sure it snaps into place so you don't put it in wrong. Typically, you just want to screw it in right. Don't screw it in too tight, just snug. That's all it has to be. It's just holding it down. Now you take the cover off the processor section. Save it, just in case you need to return the motherboard, because there is a chance you may need to return the motherboard, and they require that piece. Each one of these is a pin. All these small little things sticking up, so don't bend the pins. Very important. Now, right there you see that there's 2 little knobs, or this is 1, 2. Those 2 knobs are where the processor is going to fit into. It has little things on it that where you're going to see it has the 2 notches. Those 2 notches have to go in to where those 2 pins that I just showed you are. You put it into place. You see how I'm putting it in with the pins. Now you see those 2 guide pins on the sides, the plastic guide pins, and you make sure it's in place. Now you see how it goes in, and it slides into that nub in the front there, and you hold it down. So the front goes underneath that little thumb screw right there in the front. And you put the paste onto the processor. It's like a thermal paste. That will conduct heat away from the processor. There's our fan. And it's a CPU fan and a CPU optional fan. Those are 2. So the one above it is going to be the regular CPU fan. That's going to be the one you're going to want to put it into, the one above it. These are our lock tabs for the fan. Now that means that you're going to take it out, so we don't want to do that. So we turn it backwards, and it releases. On the bottom, there's a little thing it releases so that you can fit it into the holes right here and here. You'll see the difference. This one's ready to go in the hole. And the one with the black knob is not ready to go in the hole. So we just make sure they're all ready to go inside these fan holes, and you orient the fan so that you can plug it in with a little slack. Keep the wiring out of the way. And you just make sure I'm wiggling it so that it feels like a good fit. Now with 2 thumbs, on either side, you're going to want to press them down. Make sure it's in right. Now you press down with equal power and you hear 2 little click noises. If you don't, recheck it and make sure it's in there right. Same with the opposite sides. Click, click. You'll hear that noise. That means it's in place and it sits a little below the ring. Right here. Sits a little bit below that ring, and that's what we want. If you see one that's up, it's probably in wrong. Connector goes into the top connector. On this motherboard, on other motherboards, it may be different. So always pay attention to what on the motherboard itself. It usually tells you where it goes. This is our memory. And with the motherboard, you got to make sure it goes in right. And each motherboard memory slot is here. And they're keyed, so you got black and gray. So you want to put equal amounts into either black and or gray. So on this opposite side, it doesn't open. Just the top side opens. So you angle in the memory. Just got to make sure it's in right. You see, that's wrong. We don't want to put it in that way. So we flip it. Now that looks right. We do the bottom side first and slide it down a little bit. Not much. There we go. We got it in right now. And you push down on with your thumbs just like that. Do not bend this any other way. Just try and do it straight down. And now you do the other one and the other black. That's the one I chose. You could choose the gray. It doesn't matter. Press it down. Now when you get to your graphics card, you just remove the plastic pieces that are covering any fans that are on the graphics card. Some graphics cards do not come with a fan, and that's okay. Now there's the back side where we got our connectors. Most of them are HDMI. There is a standard display port too. That's an HDMI port. And then you got others so you could fit more monitors in there. Here's our power. And on the bottom here is our connector. This is the connector that's going to go in the motherboard. Do not push this down into the motherboard without removing it. That's where it goes. So if you do that, you'll damage that piece. So we just make sure, now you make sure it fits right. And that's what I was doing right there. So I had to make sure that it fits right. So now I know I can remove those 2 things for our connectors and our cooling. So I removed 2 of them. And that requires me to open this back piece. Some of them screw like this, and some of them are just screws in the back. Depending on your case, it'll be different, but that's okay. I slide that up. And it's just on guide, so I slide it up and down. Now I'm going to remove the 1 screw for that 1 plate. And it came right out. We save it for later because we're going to use it. Pull it out. And the other one we just kind of pull out. I should have done this when we did the beginning, but in the beginning before anything, but I didn't have the motherboard in there to really measure. So it can come out easily this way. You just kind of flex it back and forth. It's a little metal piece. It's sharp. Be careful. And it'll pop out. That's it. Now we slide it down, even pressure. Let's make sure it's down right. And in the slot. Just guide it. Just make sure it's snug and down proper. If you have to remove it, there's a little bit you can remove it on the bottom, right where my finger was before. It's hard to see, but it's right there. It's a little piece that you push down to get it out. Just pop it down, and then you can remove the whole thing. All right, so these are our other pieces. I wanted to show you that if you remove some other pieces, you could then put these replacement pieces in there from the case itself. And you just use screws to screw it down. All right, just screw it down. And now those plates are in place. And now you tighten the slider on the back of the case. Now, these are all your wires. These are our power connectors, which I showed you earlier. One goes into the side of the motherboard. The other one goes around the top. So we're going to route this wire right up top and put it in that hole area. It's going to be hard to get it in there sometimes, but you just push it in. Then use tie wraps to keep the wiring out of the way. It's pretty important to put tie wraps or some kind of felt straps just to keep the wires neat. Don't tighten them too much. I know a lot of people that do that, and it's really not conducive to the wiring itself. So just give it a snug tight when you do the tie wraps themselves or the felt cable straps. There you go. Tighten it up. Position your wire. That's okay. And clip the end. Now it's a nice, neat little package. It sits there out of the way. You do the same thing with your fan connector for the power for the fan. Just keep it out of the way of the motherboard. This is the back of the motherboard you're looking at on the right-hand side. All right. Just snug up the wires nice and neat. And clip that little excess wire tie. And there you go. You put in your big connector into the bottom and just leave it in there, and you try and measure with your hand. You can go in the front and then measure it so that you can plug it in. But these are your PCIe connectors. We're going to need one of those for our graphics card. PCI Express. That's what it stands for. And you just try and neaten up the wires, and you try and make it as neat as you can. Doesn't have to be perfect right now. We'll do that later. Just getting it in place so that we know our wires are ready to be plugged into the devices in the front. We need that one for our fan. There's our fan connector. And plug it in. And the excess you want to tuck away inside the case. Now, for now, you can just let it hang like that because it's not going to be perfect until we're nearly done. Just try and organize the wiring. All right, another tie wrap. Hold those wires out of the way. And again, snug but not too tight. Here we go. Sometimes it's hard to get it in to the slot, but once you get it in, it zips right in there. All right, there we go. Got it in there. Just kind of organize the wires a little bit, get them out of the way of each other, and try and neaten them up a bit. And you clip the little end. Be careful you don't clip a wire. I've had people do that, and yeah, that's the end of that. So we straighten these out on the bottom, these other wires, and it looks like we're not going to need these. So we push them. We're going to push them in the case out of the way. See how I just kind of neatly package them, and then if I package them right and I put it into the case, see how I'm molding them so they fit a little better? I will get another tie wrap and I will put this together, and I won't tighten it too much, but I'll keep it tight so that it holds the bundle. And you cut the excess off. So if you ever need extra power, you have it there and it's ready to go. Tuck it in the case. There we go. And we tie wrap the other section of wires that we're going to be pushing into the front of the case very soon. These are the front panel connectors. Gets easy as you do it. There we go. We got a little bit tight. And these are all plastic, so they're not going to have any metal in them, which is a good thing. So now I neaten it up so that I can fit them all. All my connectors are there. I'm not going to use this SATA connector. We'll tuck that out of the way. Okay. Those are the ones we're going to use. The ones that I'm holding right now. A package of wires. Those are going to be pushed into the front of the case. So we hold them, wrap them up, and neatly push them through a spot in the case around where you feel the motherboard is going to be and where you're going to connect them. So I'm going to push them in here, and then you will see them in the front of the case when we turn it around. But everything back here should look pretty neat, so that you're not messing with a conglomerate of wires. You don't want that. You want it to look pretty neat. There we go. In the motherboard book, it shows you where the front panel connectors go. Shows you the lead for the power, reset, and all of that. This is the power connector itself from the power supply. So you orientate it right. It only goes in one way. So if you force it, it'll break. Just make sure it slides in right and snaps. Now, our PCI Express is going to need this extra side connector, so we put that together and hold it. Then, when we plug it in, this one won't go in but one way. It'll only go in this one way. And you just click it into place. If it's too hard to click, usually it's in the wrong way. Here's our USB 3. USB 3 connector. Push that in. And make sure you feel the solid connection of this one. It's a little difficult sometimes, but we should be able to push that right in there. And that'll be our front 2 USB 3 on the top of the panel of the case. Just hold the wires out of the way. Here we go. This one is showing... That one was for the, right there is for the audio connection to the motherboard. And there it is. There's the connector. I'm pointing right at it. It has a little pin out. You see that? It's a tiny little pin out there. Only this one connector goes in there, so no other connector will fit in there. It shouldn't if you have a good case. Some connectors from other cases I found do, but just be careful with that. Make sure the one pin out is in the right spot before you go pressing really hard. All right, here's where our USB 2.0 goes. Plug it in there. If you can get in there. There we go. That one plugged right in. Here's our front panel connectors. Now, they're very difficult to see, but the motherboard book shows us where they would go. There. Oh, this one's the top CPU connector on the top of the case. The one we pushed through earlier in the beginning of the back section. There we go. It's an 8-pin connector, so that connector fits fine. And you see how I tucked away the wires a little bit? Just push them out of the way. Now, these are the front panel connectors. So when you go ahead and push in the front panel connectors, make sure you have them stacked. I usually do this by pressing them together like one connector. So I kind of look at the motherboard book, make sure they're blocked in the right fashion. The right orientation. And you see how I'm holding them together? It's a little difficult to do. This part is probably among the hardest thing to do on a motherboard, is to put that connector together and put it all in place and plug them all in at one time. So I'm holding them like as they would show me in the motherboard book. There's always a front panel connector diagram, and you use that to make them into one thing that looks like a connector, one full connector. Now you make sure it's together, hold them tight, and then you put them close inside where the motherboard is. You got to rearrange it sometimes to make sure it's one connector. Here we go. There we go. Put them into place. Now, I did that on purpose. You couldn't see me put those connectors in. They were just too small. But they just go press right in. If you have it in right, it'll just plug right in. Now, this is the finished computer inside with some wiring in there, and you see how neat the wires are? You just want to make sure it's neat. Now, when you have a glass case, it usually comes with grommets. Don't lose the grommets, but there's extras in that box from the beginning if you do lose one. And those grommets are just there for the glass. They're little rubber grommets. So, but the screws on the side of the case just screw right in. All right. Go. Put the back on. You got to make sure it's all flush. That's all you have to do with the back. And you screw it in. Usually they're either thumb screws or they're regular screws, depending on what kind of case you have. Either or, it doesn't matter. There's our plug. That's our power. That's off. Whenever you're plugging in power, make sure it's at the circle. That's off. The line is when it's on. Oh, man, you cut me off, bro.